of a happy family while Karen carried on an affair with her boss, and Rachel and Emily helped her cover it up. When Mark finally uncovered the truth, it wasn't just infidelity that tore his world apart. It was the collusion, the gaslighting, the deliberate betrayal by the very people he lived for. What followed was a storm of broken trust, public exposure, financial warfare, and a final decision that would change the rest of his life: to cut them off completely. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about identity, about the cost of silence, and about the power of choosing yourself when the people around you choose deception. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for John Stories channel, where we bring you gripping, emotional, and real-life tales like this every single day.
Mark and Karen had been together for 30 years, longer than some marriages survive, longer than some people even stay in the same city. They met young. He was 22. Artistic, emotional, always the one clinging to Mark's leg when she was little. Between them, Mark felt like he had it all: a loving wife, two bright daughters, and a life that, while not flashy, was stable and meaningful. But as we all learn eventually, stability can be deceiving. It could lull you into comfort so deep that you stop noticing the signs. You write off little things. You convince yourself it's all in your head. That's what Mark did for months. Karen began acting distant. Not cold, but distracted. She started going out with the girls more often. What used to be once-a-month dinner dates with Rachel and Emily turned into a bi-weekly ritual. At first he thought it was great. A mom bonding with her daughters? Who wouldn't want that? But soon it felt off. Karen became hyper-protective of her phone. She changed her passwords. One time, Mark picked up her phone to check the time, and she snatched it from him like he was holding classified CIA documents. That's when the gut instinct kicked in. That primal, quiet voice inside that says, "Something's wrong." Still, Mark said nothing. He rationalized it. Maybe menopause, maybe stress, maybe she just needed space. Then came the moment that shattered the illusion. Mark had taken an earlier flight home from a canceled work trip. When he walked through the front door, he heard Karen's voice from the kitchen, soft, intimate, like she was talking to someone he didn't expect him to hear. The moment she saw him, she hung up instantly and smiled awkwardly. "Just Rachel," she said. But Rachel never called her during the day, and Karen wasn't one to end calls without saying goodbye. A week later, Mark overheard something else, this time from Emily. He walked into the room just in time to hear her whisper, "Do you think he knows?" Karen froze. Emily spun around and forced the smile. "Just talking about a surprise for your birthday," she chirped. His birthday had passed 3 weeks earlier. The truth was starting to surface, one inconsistency at a time. Then came the email. Subject line, "Your wife is cheating on you." At first, Mark dismissed it as a scam. Who sends that kind of thing seriously? But curiosity won. He clicked. Inside was a grainy video taken at an office party, apparently. In it, a visibly drunk woman, slurring her words, casually says to the camera, "Oh, Karen and Richard, please, everyone knows. They've been doing it for over a year." Richard, her boss. The one she'd claimed was mentoring her. The one who bought her that silver bracelet 2 months ago. Mark felt the blood drained from his face. Still, he wasn't ready to confront her, not without undeniable proof. So he played detective. He pretended to leave town for work, then tracked her phone, drove quietly to the address, watched from a distance as his wife stepped out of his car, kissed him on the cheek, and laughed like a woman 20 years younger. He took photos. But instead of confronting her privately, he sent those pictures to the entire family group chat. Karen's siblings, his parents, their daughters, aunts and uncles. With one sentence: "Hope you're enjoying dinner with the girls. Looks like Richard's enjoying it too." What followed was chaos. Rachel texted frantically, "Dad, what are you talking about?" Emily begged for clarity. Mark said nothing until he got home. He walked into a room full of wide eyes and held up his phone silently, playing the video for them all. Karen turned pale. Rachel turned defensive. Emily cried. Mark didn't yell. He didn't even speak for a long time. When he finally did, it was a whisper laced with heartbreak. "It's not just the affair. It's the lying, the planning, the fact that all three of you sat at my table and looked me in the eyes while helping her lie to me."
He asked them to leave, all of them. Rachel protested. "You're ruining my wedding over this." Karen cried. Emily begged, but he didn't budge. The house was silent after they left, not just quiet, hollow. The kind of stillness that presses on your chest like grief. Mark sat down on the same couch where he'd celebrated birthdays, Christmas mornings, movie nights with popcorn spilled across the cushions. And yet now it felt unfamiliar, contaminated by betrayal. He didn't sleep that night, or the night after. He tried to distract himself, watched TV, scrolled mindlessly, even tried organizing the garage. But every corner of the house whispered reminders of the life he thought he had. The photo on the mantel from Rachel's graduation, the magnet from Emily's art camp, the spot on the wall where Karen insisted on hanging that hideous wreath every fall. They had been everywhere, in everything. And now, it all felt false. Mark's best friend Dave showed up the next afternoon unannounced, holding a bag of takeout and 2 beers. "Heard you set the group chat on fire," he said, half joking, but his eyes were serious. Mark didn't even touch the food. Dave stayed for hours, listening without interrupting, as Mark laid it all out: the suspicions, the tracking app, the video, the betrayal. When he finished, Dave leaned back and said something that stuck with him. "You didn't lose a wife and 2 daughters. You just finally saw them for who they really are." That sentence rang in Mark's ears for days. He tried to believe it, tried to tell himself he was better off without the lies. But the truth is, when you've spent decades sacrificing for your family, working double shifts, skipping nights out, giving up your own dreams, cutting them off doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like failure. Still, he couldn't go back. Not after the way Rachel reacted. Entitled, indignant, more upset about her wedding plans than the deception. She had the audacity to send him a Venmo request a week later for the florist deposit, as if nothing had changed, as if he was still just Dad, the ATM. Mark didn't respond. Instead, he did something he never thought he'd do. He called a lawyer. Not just for the divorce, but for his will. He'd built a solid life, owned their home outright, had a healthy retirement account, savings, even a boat he dreamed of passing down one day. But now? Now he didn't want any of them to see a dime. The lawyer listened, reviewed the evidence, the photos, the video, the timeline. He said, "You're in a strong legal position, but you'll want to play this smart. Document everything. Be calm, be professional, but don't bend." Mark nodded. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he had some control. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't taking it any so well. Her texts started out apologetic. "Please, I was going to tell you." Then came the manipulative ones. "You're ruining everything." Eventually she turned nasty, threatening to fight for the house, alimony, half of his pension.
She claimed she sacrificed her career for the family, despite having worked full-time for over a decade. Rachel doubled down too. When Mark ignored her calls, she left him a voicemail so polished it could have been a corporate presentation. "Dad, this hostility is damaging everyone. If you're ready to act like an adult and talk this through, let me know." It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, as if he had betrayed Bem. Emily, on the other hand, was a mess. She texted him almost daily, long apologies filled with tearful emojis and half-excuses. She even showed up at his worksite once, pale, disheveled, begging to talk. He agreed to meet her at a coffee shop, neutral ground. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Mark didn't want to yell, he didn't want to fight, but he did want answers. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily stared into her latte. "I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't want to hurt me?" he repeated, stunned. "Emily, you watched me live alive for over a year. I thought it would stop. I thought Mom would end it. But she didn't, and instead of telling me, you helped her hide it. I didn't know what to do. And honestly, I didn't think you'd listen." That one stung, not because it wasn't fair. Mark had been distant sometimes, buried in work, trying to provide. But even in her apology, she was still shifting blame. "Do you know what I did for this family?" he said, voice low. "I broke my back on construction sites. I gave up nights and weekends. I put you through college. I showed up for everything. If your mom was unhappy, she could have said something, asked for counseling, asked for a divorce. But she didn't." Emily started to cry again. "So what now? Are you cutting me out forever?" Mark didn't answer immediately. The truth is, he didn't know. His heart was still raw. The wound hadn't scabbed over, let alone healed. But what he did know was that forgiveness without accountability is just enabling. The divorce dragged on. Karen pushed for more than she was entitled to, claiming emotional distress, leaning on the sympathy of old mutual friends who didn't know the full story. Some of them reached out to Mark, saying he was being too harsh, that he needed to think about reconciliation for the sake of the family. Mark ignored them all. Until one day, Dave came over again. This time he brought his laptop. He said, "You need to see this." He opened Facebook and pulled up a post from Karen's page. A photo of her, Richard, and Rachel at a fancy restaurant. The caption read, "So blessed to be surrounded by love. Richard proposed. Can't wait to start wedding planning once we finish Rachel's big day." Mark stared at the screen, breath caught in his throat. Engaged. To her boss. Before the divorce was even finalized. And Rachel? Sitting right beside them? Smiling like nothing was wrong, calling Richard her bonus dad in the comments? That was the final straw. Mark called his lawyer the next morning and said 6 words. Change the will. All of it. No more hesitations, no more second chances. He had spent too long second-guessing himself, wondering if he'd overreacted, if maybe he'd failed somehow. But this wasn't his failure. This was their betrayal.
Have you ever had a moment where pretending led to something unexpectedly real? Please comment below and like this video if you believe the best love stories start with honesty. Subscribe our channel now for more powerful story-based videos every day. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just fracture relationships, it fractures your reality. The version of the past you trusted gets corrupted. Memories become landmines. Even silence becomes suspicious. Mark wasn't just grieving his marriage, he was grieving his entire life, as he thought it was. The day after changing his will, he got a call from Emily. Her voice was strained, trembling, as if she'd just found out someone had died. "They didn't even tell me," she said between sobs. "I found out about the engagement on Facebook, like everyone else. And when I asked Mom how she could do that while the divorce isn't even finalized, she said it's none of my business." Mark said nothing at first. He could hear the pain in her voice, but a part of him had gone numb. "She just miss how things used to be," she said softly. "I know what Mom did was wrong. I know I messed up too, but this feels so permanent." He took a breath and finally responded, his voice calm but unflinching. "Things were never what you thought they were, what we thought they were. It was all a lie, and I'm done." "What do you mean, done?" "I mean I'm moving on with my life, without any of you." Her crying intensified,
desperation soaking every word. "Dad, please, I know I messed up. I know that, but I'm trying. I'm really trying." "It's too late." He hung up. Mark expected that to be the end of it, but the fallout had only begun. Karen's lawyer reached out next, accusing him of being retaliatory, of trying to cut her off out of spite. She demanded access to assets she had never once contributed to. Even mutual friends, people who had shared barbecues and birthdays with Mark, began to whisper that he was going too far, that he was being cruel, vindictive, unforgiving. But Mark had heard enough of everyone else's opinions. For the first time in decades, he was making choices for himself. He wasn't going to let anyone guilt him into pretending things could go back to normal. One night, he slept all the way through for the first time in weeks. No dreams, no sick feeling in his gut, just stillness, peace. It wasn't happiness yet, but it was a start. He moved out of the house shortly after, found a modest place in a quiet neighborhood, a few towns over. Nothing fancy, just a small rental with neutral walls and no history, no ghosts. When he told Emily about the will, she showed up at his doorstep the next day, crying again, begging. "I'll do anything to make this right," she said. Mark didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold her. He just told her calmly, "I appreciate you coming, but my decision is final." That's when something shifted in her. The sobbing stopped, her eyes narrowed, her shoulders tensed. "So that's it," she said bitterly. 30 years of being a family and you're just throwing it all away?" Mark stood silently, staring at the girl he once taught how to ride a bike, the girl who used to wait up for him when he worked late. But that girl wasn't here anymore. "I didn't throw anything away," he said. "I just finally stopped pretending that what we had was real." Emily didn't respond. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. It should have shattered him. But strangely, it didn't. He'd read somewhere that removing toxic people from your life doesn't always feel like relief at first. It feels like withdrawal, like pulling out an infected tooth. You're left with pain and a hole in your mouth. But eventually, you notice how much lighter your body feels, how much easier it is to breathe. That's exactly how it was. And then came someone new. Mark met Jess at a friend's barbecue. She was divorced too, had gone through her own version of hell, complete with infidelity, court battles, and estranged children. There was no lightning bolt, no slow-motion eye contact across a crowded backyard, just a casual conversation over ribs and potato salad that turned into coffee, then lunch, then hiking. She didn't flinch when he told her his story. She didn't call him cold for cutting off his daughters. She just listened. And when he finished, she said something that startled him. "Good. You have every right to protect your peace." Mark hadn't realized how badly he needed to hear that. Not just validation, but permission. Permission to stop carrying the guilt for other people's choices. They took things slow. No talk of labels or ultimatums, just two people trying to rebuild something out of the rubble. For the first time in years, Mark felt seen, understood, not as a paycheck or a punching bag, but as a human being trying to heal. A few weeks later, he got a call from Derek, Rachel's fiancé. "I know this is weird, but can we talk?" Mark agreed, unsure what to expect. They met at a diner halfway between their cities. Derek looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. "I had a fight with Rachel after your fallout," he said. "I asked her about everything, the affair, the cover-up, the wedding bills. She flipped, accused me of betraying her by taking your side. It made me wonder, if she can lie to you like that, what else is she keeping from me?" Mark didn't say much, just nodded slowly. "I think I'm calling off the wedding," Derek finally said. I can't trust her. And you taught me something. About self-respect. About not letting people treat you like you don't matter. Mark walked out of that diner feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Vindicated. It didn't erase the pain, but it proved he wasn't crazy. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone.
Time passed slowly at first, the kind of slow where you notice every tick of the clock, every creak of the floorboards, every single time your phone lights up, hoping it's something meaningful, dreading it might be them again. But Mark didn't block them. Not Rachel, not Emily, not even Karen. He wasn't sure why. Maybe part of him was still waiting, not for an apology, but for understanding. For some sign that they truly got it, that they recognized the depth of the betrayal, the rot that had quietly eaten away at their family from the inside. He never got that. Rachel stopped reaching out altogether after Derek broke off the engagement. Her final message had been short and venomous. "You're dead to me. I hope you rot in that lonely little apartment." He didn't respond. What was left to say? Emily was more persistent. She sent texts every few days, nothing dramatic anymore, just short, hesitant messages. "Thinking of you today, Dad. Hope you're okay. Saw your favorite movies playing downtown. Remember when we used to go every July? I love you." Mark read them, but never replied. He didn't know if that made him heartless or just tired. He'd spent a lifetime putting others first. Now, for once, he was learning what it meant to choose himself, to honor his own pain instead of minimizing it for the sake of keeping the peace. The final crack in the illusion came when Dave, loyal, brutally honest Dave, showed up at his door again. This time, not with beer or advice, but with a laptop and a grim look on his face. "You're not going to believe this," he said. Mark braced himself. It was Karen's latest Facebook post, another dinner photo, this time of Karen, Richard, and Rachel again. Smiling, dressed up, glowing. The caption? "So lucky to have found love again. Richard has truly been my rock through all this. We're planning our wedding next summer, after Rachel's big day, of course." It wasn't the wedding that shocked Mark. It wasn't even the public display of happiness. It was the one line buried in the comments. "Can't wait for the girls to have a real father figure at the altar R." That did it. That crossed a line he didn't even know existed. Rachel, who had cut him off, who had helped cover up a 15-month affair, who had lied to his face for over a year, was now publicly embracing the man who destroyed their family, calling him a real father figure, as if he had never existed. He called his lawyer again, finalized the will, removed both daughters from any beneficiary rights, redirected everything, the house sale, the accounts, the personal belongings, to his brother and nieces, people who had stood by him, who had shown loyalty when it mattered most. A few weeks later, he got a knock on the door. Emily, tear-streaked, pale and shaking. "You changed the will," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I told you I would," Mark replied, calm but steady. She stood on the porch, struggling to find the right words. "I just thought you'd cool down, that you'd forgive me eventually." "That's the thing," he said quietly. "Forgiveness isn't about cooling off. It's about accountability. You never gave me that. Not really." "I know what I did was wrong," she pleaded. "I know I hurt you. But every time we talked, you made excuses, you pointed fingers, you said I worked too much, that I wasn't around, that if I had just noticed, maybe Mom wouldn't have cheated. I didn't mean—" Mark raised a hand. "It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what you did." Silence settled between them, the kind that makes your chest feel tight. "I'm not angry anymore," Mark said finally. "I'm just done. I hope someday you find peace, but it won't be here." Emily's eyes hardened, her body stiffened. The desperation drained from her face, replaced by something colder. "So you're really just going to erase us? After everything?" she asked. "I'm not erasing anything," he replied. "I'm choosing to stop being erased by you." She left without another word. And just like that, Mark felt something shift. Not joy, not even closure, but clarity. He went fishing with Jess the following weekend.
It was a small thing. They didn't catch much, just a couple of sunfish and some quiet moments on the lake. But for the first time in months, Mark laughed. Really laughed. He looked at her, sun on her shoulders, wind in her hair, and felt the weight lift a little more. "You're healing," she said softly. "I don't know if I'll ever be whole," he replied. "Maybe not. But broken people still deserve peace." She wasn't wrong. Sometimes we confuse healing with restoring things to how they used to be. But the truth is, healing often means letting go of people, of expectations, of the illusion that time alone will fix what truth must unravel. Mark didn't share his story publicly. He didn't make angry posts or burn wedding photos or key anyone's car. He just lived, quietly, authentically, in the open space left behind by people who chose lies over love. He started painting again, something he hadn't done since he was 20, went on long walks, cooked elaborate meals for no one but himself, took Jess to a jazz bar on Friday nights, laughed without guilt. And when people said, "But they're your daughters," or "Family is forever," or "Don't you miss them?" his answer was always the same. Family isn't just blood. It's trust. It's loyalty. And if you betray that, you don't get to demand a place in someone's life. Mark wasn't cruel. He was clear. And sometimes that clarity costs everything. But it also gives you back something far more valuable: yourself. So what can we take from this? What's the real lesson beneath the heartbreak and betrayal? It's this: love doesn't excuse lies. Family doesn't justify manipulation, and forgiveness doesn't require reunion. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they share your last name, even if they raised you or you raised them. You're allowed to grieve the version of the past you thought was real and still protect your peace going forward. Healing isn't soft. It's not always warm or poetic. Sometimes healing looks like slamming a door and changing a will. Sometimes it means choosing truth over tradition. And that's okay. Because in the end, what matters isn't who stays in your life, but who shows up for it honestly. And as Mark learned, the hard way, it's better to stand alone in truth than be surrounded by family built on lies. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to subscribe to John's Stories for more real-life tales that move, challenge, and inspire you.
They say love can blind even the sharpest minds. But what happens when the illusion of love is meticulously crafted to trap someone in a lie so deep it nearly destroys them? This is not just a story about betrayal. It's a carefully orchestrated web of deceit, manipulation, and a failed ambush that ends in courtrooms, live-streamed stabbings, and a downfall so brutal it shocked everyone involved. Imagine building a life with someone you adore, planning your future, exchanging rings, only to discover that every kiss, every smile, every whispered "I love you" was rehearsed for a con. Now picture unmasking that betrayal just weeks before your wedding, when deposits have been paid, vows half-written, and families entangled. What would you do if the person you trusted most wasn't just cheating, but plotting to use you legally and financially, with a group of her friends acting like a boardroom of emotional terrorists? This isn't a Netflix drama or courtroom thriller. This is real life, and what makes it even more compelling? The hero doesn't fight with fists or fury. He fights back with receipts, evidence, calm defiance, and a smartphone that recorded everything. If you're the kind of person who believes karma takes too long, then you're going to want to watch this to the very end, because this isn't just justice, it's poetic revenge. Before we dive deep into this roller coaster, make sure you subscribe to John's Stories channel for more shocking, emotional, and unforgettable true tales we drop every day. Now buckle up.
My name's Jake. I'm 31, and for a while I thought I was about to marry the love of my life. Her name was Lauren, 29 years old, beautiful, successful, confident, the kind of woman who walks into a room and everyone notices. She worked in luxury real estate. You know the type. The just sold another $2.3 million listing type, with overly edited Instagram stories and a LinkedIn full of hustle quotes. We met in the most casual way, at the sports bar I manage. I know, not exactly a Wall Street job, but I love what I do. I started as a bartender with a business degree I never really used, then climbed my way up to general manager of one of the best performing locations in our state. Good regulars, decent money, and a team that actually respects me, which is more than most can say in the service industry. Lauren came in one night with a pack of ultra-polished friends. They were celebrating a birthday and dropped $600 on craft cocktails and sliders like it was nothing. I remember her laughing at my dumb bar jokes while sipping some overpriced pomegranate martini. We hit it off fast. The thing is, when someone gorgeous, driven, and popular like Lauren gives you the time of day, you feel lucky, even if you're not supposed to. She started showing up during my shifts, stayed late, and after just a few months, she was basically living at my place. By the 1-year mark, we officially moved in together. I had a decent 2-bedroom in a modern building downtown. Nothing extravagant, but it had good security, a doorman, and it was in my name thanks to my credit score and rental history. Looking back, that decision probably saved my life. Everything seemed great. For a while. She was making serious money, easily double what I made, and while I never cared, her friends sure did. I'd hear little digs all the time like, "Isn't it great that Jake's happy with his job?" Or, "Maybe he'll move into corporate one day." Lauren never corrected them. Sometimes she even agreed. It didn't take long for the red flags to start waving like a parade. She began working late, more often, kept her phone face down constantly, and randomly changed her password one day. All textbook stuff, but love, real or imagined, has a way of dulling your instincts. Then came Sarah, a regular customer, always polite, a true trivia night veteran. She pulled me aside one Wednesday looking completely rattled and said, "Jake, if I were in your shoes, I'd want someone to tell you." Sarah's sister worked at an elite hair salon in the city. Apparently, Lauren had been a regular there, always scheduling her appointments when I was at work. That morning, during a 2-hour session, she spent the whole time on the phone with a man, laughing, cooing, calling him babe, telling him she couldn't wait for their weekend getaway, that her idiot fiancé thought she was attending a work seminar. As Sarah said this, my ears rang, my face flushed. Part of me wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, but then she showed me the Instagram story. Some random influencer at a high-end restaurant posted a celebratory pic with a champagne tower, and right there, in the background, was Lauren, cozied up to some guy in a tailored navy suit. The timestamp? 9:47 p.m. Lauren had sent me a face mask selfie at 9:52 p.m., claiming she was having a girls' night. She had literally staged an entire fake photo to cover her tracks. I played it cool, thanked Sarah, and went back to work like a zombie. I still had half a shift to go, but my mind was gone. That night, I remembered her shared iPad at home. Months ago, Lauren had synced her iCloud to it while getting her phone repaired. She must have forgotten. Once I got home, she claimed to be at a friend's house. I opened it. What I saw broke something in me. Hundreds of messages with a guy named Ethan, her ex. Not some new fling, this was a full-blown relationship. There were photos, jokes at my expense, even plans for their future. They were sleeping together at a hotel near his office for months. And it wasn't just cheating, it was scheming. Worse, her friends, those corporate professionals who threw shade at my bar job, were in on it. They gave her advice, helped her lie, coached her on how to keep me distracted. There were screenshots of messages from the night I proposed. While I nervously fumbled with a ring box, she was texting Ethan, "It's just business. You're the one I love." And still, she accepted the proposal.
I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in the living room, staring at that iPad, scrolling through 4 months of betrayal dressed up as relationship milestones. Anniversary? He got a "thank you for being patient" text from her. Christmas, she sent him selfies in the dress I bought her. The night we celebrated our engagement, she called it a business arrangement in their chat. You ever have a moment so emotionally disorienting that even your memories start to feel like lies? That was me. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was humiliated. My entire relationship had been a front, a placeholder for something more profitable. The next day, I worked like a ghost. I didn't want to scream or lash out. I wanted to know how deep this went. I started digging harder, backed up everything. Screenshots, cloud backups, even photos of the iPad screen itself. She had made a mistake thinking I wouldn't find out. But I wasn't going to make the mistake of leaving without a fight. When Lauren came home the next night, I was calm. That scared her more than yelling would have. She walked in around 7 p.m., bubbly as ever, talking about how she'd shown 3 properties and maybe we should order sushi. I didn't answer, just handed her the iPad. For about 2 seconds, she played dumb. What's this? Then she saw the open message thread, with the date in big, bold font. She froze, dropped the iPad onto the coffee table like it burned her hands. Her instinct? Not apology, not guilt, just manipulation. Tears welled up fast. It was a mistake, she said. He's my past, you're my future. You ever watch someone pretend to cry? Not just fail at it, but act like it's a role they've been rehearsing? That was her. I asked her, very plainly, if she had any regrets. You know what she said? But Jake, what about the wedding deposits? My parents paid so much. What will people say? That's when it clicked. This wasn't love. This wasn't confusion. This was a calculated plan to bleed me dry and play the victim in the aftermath. So I made my move. The wedding is off, I told her. You've got 30 days to move out. I'll be staying at a friend's place tonight. Pack whatever you need. She blinked, her lips twitching like she couldn't decide whether to cry harder or scream. Then she did the most suspicious thing of all. She started texting. Fast. And with this weird little smirk. I ignored it, went to grab my duffel bag and some work clothes, and told her I'd leave peacefully. That's when things took a sharp, violent turn. Just as I was walking out the door, I heard tires screech in the parking lot below. 5 cars. Women poured out like it was a coordinated mission. Lauren's friends, the same group who made fun of me for managing a bar. Only now, they weren't in suits and heels, they were in hoodies and sneakers, like they'd just come from the gym or were ready to brawl. Lauren stood on our balcony, arms crossed like a general watching soldiers march into battle. My gut dropped. This wasn't over. Out in the parking lot, I hit record on my phone and kept it in my jacket pocket. Best decision of my life. Hannah, the finance exec and rugby alum, stormed up first. She started yelling about how I was abusive, that they weren't going to let Lauren spend another night with a monster like me. Behind her was Jessica, lawyer, Maria, doctor, Ashley, marketing, and Rachel, who would become very important later. Some of them looked uncertain, but none of them stopped what happened next. I stayed calm, hands up, told them I gave Lauren legal notice. I'm leaving. Please don't escalate. But Hannah wasn't interested in logic. She got right into my face, 5'4" and all muscle, then shoved me. Before I could even react, Jessica grabbed my arm like she was executing a citizen's arrest, and Rachel started filming. Not discreetly either. Phone out, camera on, screaming stop resisting as Hannah kicked me in the ribs. Maria and Ashley just stood there, frozen but doing nothing to help. I knew I had one shot at this. With one arm free, I managed to hit my iPhone's SOS, 5 taps on the side button, instant 911. Police are coming, I shouted, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Rachel shouted back, no one will believe you. Then Hannah did the unthinkable. She stabbed me. It wasn't deep. I flinched hard and the blade glanced, but it was enough to need 12 stitches later. Blood spilled down my arm. I fell to the pavement, heart racing, vision blurred. And just like that, it was over. Cops stormed in, weapons drawn. Jessica and Hannah tried to run. Rachel refused to put her phone down until an officer tackled her. Lauren stood on our balcony screaming about how I attacked them, holding a knife block like she'd been ready to jump in herself. But what they didn't realize
Everything was caught. On my phone, on building security cams, on Rachel's own live stream. This wasn't assault anymore. This was evidence. Now let's pause here because this is where reality begins to feel like satire. As I sat in the ER getting stitched up, bruised ribs making every breath a struggle, a victim advocate from the DA's office showed up, and I'll never forget what she said. This doesn't happen often, but when it does, we bring the hammer down. Meanwhile, the women who attacked me, they had no clue how stupid they'd been. Turns out Rachel had been live streaming the entire ambush to a private Instagram group, one the police got access to with a warrant. That group chat? A goldmine of criminal stupidity. They had planned everything, not just the attack, not just the filming, they rehearsed it like a twisted college project. They used corporate work phones to organize the assault, even discussed which angles to film from and what phrases would make it sound like self-defense. You can't make this up. Even more unbelievable, 2 days after the attack, while I was still in the hospital, Lauren had the audacity to show up at my bar. Told my coworkers and regulars that I had snapped, that the whole thing was a misunderstanding. She was playing chess, but she brought checkers to a courtroom. Because remember, Michael, the ex she'd been cheating with, he was a licensed attorney, and he started sending threatening emails to me and the cops who arrested his girlfriend's friends. From his work email. He wrote things like, "You don't know who you're dealing with," and "This will all go away if you drop the charges." He even bragged about having friends in the DA's office. That alone got another warrant issued, and what they found made everything 10 times worse. When investigators finally combed through the seized devices, what they uncovered wasn't just damning, it was theatrical. Rachel's live stream, which she thought would paint me as the villain, actually documented the premeditated ambush in full HD. But it was the group chat archives that blew the case wide open. Months of conversations were recovered. Screenshots, voice memos, even PowerPoint-like breakdowns of who would say what, stand where, and press record at what moment. They discussed ideal angles for filming me getting violent, how to provoke me just enough to make it look like they were defending themselves. You know what else they found? Google searches. How to make a stabbing look like self-defense. What happens if you fake an attack? Can I go to jail if I stab someone who didn't touch me? And every bit of it tied to their work phones. These Ivy League-educated corporate success stories had used company property to plan a felony. Meanwhile, I was still recovering, physically and emotionally. The wound on my arm healed faster than the ache in my chest, not because of the stabbing, but because I had trusted someone who never loved me. Lauren hadn't just betrayed me, she had groomed me into stability while planning my downfall with her friends. It wasn't heartbreak, it was strategic cruelty. 2 days after the attack, as if none of that had happened, Lauren tried to reclaim the narrative. She went to my job, spun lies to my staff, claimed I had snapped, that I had a history of emotional abuse, that she feared for her life. But remember, I had evidence, real, irrefutable, unshakable evidence. And more importantly, so did the police. Then came Michael's meltdown. You remember him, the lawyer boyfriend she cheated with? He began emailing threats directly to the officers who arrested her friends. Full-on villain mode. I know people. You don't want to be on the wrong side of this. Drop the charges or your career's over. And the kicker? He sent these emails from his law firm's official domain. As a licensed attorney, that alone kicked off a whole separate bar investigation into his conduct. Meanwhile, the DA's office was building a bulletproof case. Multiple camera angles, medical records, witness testimonies, Rachel's live stream, and screenshots of Lauren's own messages outlining how to make it look like I was the abuser. The prosecution was salivating. But the twist that really brought it all crashing down came from the most unlikely person, Ashley. Out of all the women involved, Ashley had seemed the most hesitant that night. She didn't attack me, didn't yell, barely moved, just stood there on the sidelines with her arms crossed, looking pale. 2 weeks later, her conscience caught up. Her lawyer contacted the DA. Ashley wanted to cut a deal, full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence.
She didn't just hand over the existing chat logs, she revealed a separate secret group chat the others didn't know about, a backup where she documented even more. Voice notes, screenshots, and videos of them rehearsing the attack in Maria's garage gym. There were even practice runs. One clip showed Hannah pretending to stab a mannequin, Rachel testing camera angles, Jessica reading fake police report lines. And then there was Lauren. In one particularly haunting voice memo, Lauren said, "This will be over fast. We frame Jake, cry a little, make it look like trauma, then I divorce him, walk away with half, and rebuild with Michael. Easy." Hearing it for the first time felt like reliving the betrayal all over again. She wasn't just heartless, she was calculating. Ashley's confession shattered whatever defense the others were clinging to. And yet, despite the mountain of evidence, despite everything, Lauren still tried to flip the script in court. When trial began, her legal team painted her as the victim, claimed I was emotionally volatile, that I'd snooped into her private messages, that I had no right to go through the iPad, even though it was shared and synced to my account. They tried to argue that catching her cheating was the real abuse. They even tried to twist my request for her to move out as domestic intimidation. I had to sit on that witness stand for 2 full days while their attorneys tried to poke holes in my character. They asked why I didn't react violently when I found out. They asked why I was so calm during the ambush. They asked if I had anger issues I was repressing. It was maddening, but necessary. I didn't break, not once. And then came Ashley. Testifying for the prosecution, she didn't just answer questions, she laid out every single plan like a roadmap of malice. She read their strategy aloud, described how Lauren had rehearsed tears, explained how they were counting on the legal system's bias against men in domestic disputes. Ashley even confirmed that Michael, Lauren's lawyer boyfriend, had helped draft the fake police report against me, under oath, with the jury hanging on to every word. At that moment, you could feel the shift in the courtroom. The defense scrambled. Lauren exploded. She began yelling from the table, "I deserve to be angry. He violated my trust. He went through my messages." And then she slipped. In a rage, she admitted Michael helped her fake the report. On the record. The judge's expression went from bored to electrified. You could practically see the gears turning. Everything the prosecution needed was now confirmed, on tape, in writing, and out loud. The verdicts came fast. Hannah, the stabber, 36 months in state prison, no parole for 24 months, followed by 5 years probation. Jessica, who tackled me, same sentence. Rachel, who filmed it all and screamed false accusations, same sentence. Maria, who let them train in her garage gym and stood by, 18 months probation, 300 hours of community service. Ashley, who turned witness, 12 months probation with mandated counseling. Michael, currently facing bar suspension and criminal conspiracy charges. Lauren, still awaiting her own separate trial, but accepted a plea deal. Details sealed, but she's looking at years, not months. I don't feel triumphant. I feel relieved. Because justice doesn't always come in waves. It trickles. Slowly, patiently. But when it hits, it changes everything. Have you ever had a moment where pretending led to something unexpectedly real? Please comment below and like this video if you believe the best love stories start with honesty. Subscribe our channel now for more powerful story-based videos every day.
Even after the trial ended and the guilty were sentenced, the fallout didn't stop. You'd think someone like Lauren, exposed so publicly, would lay low, rebuild quietly, take the L and move on, but narcissists rarely go down quietly. Instead, she went on the offensive, on social media, through fake accounts, and even in real life. It started with whispers, anonymous Reddit threads, TikTok comments, edited video clips from Rachel's original stream posted online, spliced to remove any context and portray me as the aggressor. Look, he's yelling. Look, he's leaving the scene. Guilty behavior. Of course, the full footage, building security, my phone recording, medical records, all told the truth. But that didn't stop the narrative war. Lauren made burner accounts to message my coworkers, claiming I had a violent temper and a history of emotional control. She called my parents' house, left voicemails pretending to be reporters. She even showed up to the bar one night, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, trying to blend in. She sat at the far end, sipping a water, just watching. One of my bartenders spotted her and immediately called security. She left before they arrived, but that moment stuck with me. It wasn't over for her. It wasn't over for me. See, nobody tells you that even when justice is served, healing doesn't happen overnight. Your brain doesn't update like an app. You don't delete someone from your heart just because the evidence says you should. You question everything. Your memory, your judgment, even your worth. I went through weeks of wondering, was it my fault? Should I have noticed sooner? Was I too trusting? Too naive? But here's the truth I came to accept. When someone wants to lie to you, and they do it with enough conviction, they can become whoever you want them to be. And that's not on you. That's on them. But what you do after the mask comes off, that's on you. So I rebuilt. Slowly. I focused on work. I started therapy. I took long walks without headphones just to hear myself think. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during the relationship. And most of all, I'd let myself feel everything. Not just the anger, the embarrassment, the grief for a future that was never real. One of the things that helped the most? Talking to people who'd been through similar betrayals. A guy named Marcus reached out after my story gained traction in our community. His wife had run a years-long affair while building a facade of a perfect marriage. He told me something I'll never forget. When people deceive with love, it's the deepest cut, because love is supposed to be where we heal, not what wounds us. And he was right. Healing doesn't mean you pretend it didn't happen. Healing means you accept that it did, and you refuse to let it define your ability to love again. Lauren? Her life spiraled after the case. With 3 of her best friends in prison and 2 others socially exiled, she tried to land on her feet professionally, but her reputation preceded her. The real estate agency she worked for cut ties within a week of the sentencing. Michael's law firm dropped him before the state bar could even vote. And while she tried to spin it as a smear campaign for a while, eventually the silence swallowed her story. People moved on. But I didn't need revenge. I didn't need her to suffer endlessly. I just needed the truth to be known. I needed to walk into my bar, into my home, into my own head, and know that I was no longer gaslighting myself to believe someone's lies. Months later, something poetic happened. I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo, me and Lauren at our engagement dinner, toasting. The back of the photo had one sentence. You deserved better. I don't know who sent it. Could have been Ashley. Could have been no one. But it was the first time I looked at that photo and didn't feel stupid. I felt proud. Because I got out. Because I stood up. Because I healed. So here's what I want to leave you with. Whether you've been cheated on, manipulated, used, or gaslit, do not measure your worth by how someone else mistreated you. Toxic people don't choose weak victims. They choose strong ones they think they can break. And if you survive that kind of betrayal, you are not broken. You are bulletproof. You are wiser, sharper. You've stared into the eyes of someone who said, I love you, while sharpening a knife behind your back, and you made it out. That's power. And that's not the end of the story. That's the beginning of a new one. If this story moved you, made you think twice, or just made you grateful you're not in Jake's shoes, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more powerful stories like this every single day, right here on John Stories.
Whether it's betrayal, justice, love, or life, there's always a lesson to be found. Thanks for watching. And remember, you deserve better. Always.
Imagine standing ankle-deep in puddles on a freezing New York sidewalk, your hands trembling not just from the cold, but from the weight of your sister's unpaid tuition, while trying to protect a small flower stand from being swallowed by a storm. Then, out of nowhere, a man in a designer suit, soaked and desperate, drops to his knees in front of you with a velvet ring box, begging for your help. But not for love. For a lie. That's exactly what happened to Claire Bennett, a gritty, independent florist in Brooklyn, whose life took an unimaginable turn after one rainy afternoon. She thought she was just helping out a stranger named Nathaniel Cross, a rich, sharp-dressed man with eyes that looked more exhausted than arrogant. All he asked for was 5 minutes of her time to pretend to be his girlfriend at a family dinner. She agreed, mostly for the $500 he offered. But what unfolded in the next few days would change both of their lives forever. This wasn't just a fake relationship turned real. It was about class divides, family pressure, buried dreams, and a love that bloomed in the least expected place. If you've ever wondered what happens when two completely different worlds collide in the most unpredictable way, you're about to find out. If you love dramatic, emotional stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to John's Stories channel and get new powerful tales every day that will make you laugh, cry, and believe in love all over again.
The rain that day wasn't just a drizzle. It felt like the entire sky was grieving, pounding New York's concrete with sharp, bitter drops. On the corner of the Brooklyn Farmers Market, Claire Bennett was battling the storm like she always did, with grit and duct tape. Her flower stall, a patchwork of crates, tarps, and hand-painted signs, looked like it had weathered 100 similar tempests. And maybe it had. She wasn't afraid of rain, or cold fingers, or rejection. What she feared was losing the last thread of stability she clung to, her sister Emily's future. While Claire fought with a flapping tarp over her lavender bundles, a blur of navy blue and soaked silk appeared from the alley. At first, she thought it was just another Wall Street suit who took a wrong turn, but then the man, Nathaniel Cross, though she didn't know his name yet, stopped right in front of her. Drenched from head to toe, his chest heaving like he had run a marathon in dress shoes. "I need your help. Just 5 minutes," he said, water dripping from his lashes to his tie. She blinked. Help with what? That's when he did the most unexpected thing. He dropped to his knees, splashing into the puddle in front of her stand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Out of his damp coat, he pulled a velvet box. Not to propose to her, but to bribe her. "I'll give you $500, he said, opening the box to reveal a cheap ring, now half-drenched, "if you pretend to be my girlfriend. Just for 5 minutes. Claire stared at him like he had 3 heads. "I don't even know your name!" "That's why it works. My name's Nathaniel. Nathaniel Cross. My family's expecting me at dinner right now, and they think I'm in a serious relationship. If I walk in alone, it'll be complicated." She wasn't sure whether to be flattered, horrified, or call security. But then, like in every life-defining moment, something small shifted. Claire looked down at the crushed bouquet at her feet, looked at Nathaniel's pale, pleading eyes, and then thought of Emily, still behind on tuition, still working 2 shifts between pre-med classes. "Fine," she said at last. "But I have one condition." "Anything," he replied almost too fast. "If I get humiliated, I leave. And I don't care about the money." Nathaniel nodded, a rare flicker of gratitude flickering beneath the chaos in his expression. Deal. They rushed through the storm and ducked into a sleek black SUV waiting by the curb. As Claire sat down and wiped the fog off the window, she started to realize what she had just agreed to. They drove uptown, toward the part of Manhattan that most people only ever see in magazines. Pristine brownstones, gated mansions, trees trimmed like they were under contract with a French palace. And finally, a 3-story Georgian-style home glowing from within like a Tiffany display case. "This is what you call a small family dinner?" she whispered. Nathaniel managed a crooked smile. "My mom tends to exaggerate." She said nothing as they stepped out and approached the grand stone steps. Just before they reached the door, he took her hand, not forcefully, not theatrically, gently. "Just remember, 5 minutes." But Claire already knew something was off. She hadn't even stepped into the house, and yet her heart was pounding like she was walking into battle. Inside, everything was polished wood, crystal chandeliers, and the faint scent of wine and money. An elegant woman in a midnight blue gown appeared first, Elaine Cross, Nathaniel's mother. She was every bit the high society matriarch, poised, clipped, and unblinking. "Nate," she said with restrained affection. Then her gaze slid to Claire. "And this must be—" "Claire Bennett," he said without hesitation. "My girlfriend." Elaine tilted her head ever so slightly, the way someone might examine a stain on a priceless dress. But to Claire's surprise, she smiled. "Lovely to meet you, Claire." The pleasantries continued. Next was Robert Cross, Nathaniel's father, a steely man in his early 60s with a handshake that felt more like a contract signing. "What do you do, Claire?" "I run a flower stall in Brooklyn," she said evenly, holding her ground as the room seemed to pause for breath. "Really?" Elaine asked, her curiosity piqued. Claire nodded. "I pick the flowers myself at 4 a.m., arrange them, deliver them, everything. It's not glamorous, but I love it." And just like that, something strange happened. The scrutiny turned to intrigue. Elaine's lips parted in a subtle smile. It's rare to hear someone talk about their work like that. Even Robert, usually stone-faced, seemed impressed. "You've silenced an entire room," he said dryly. "I'll offer a free flower arranging workshop if it helps," Claire replied, her voice deadpan. That night, Claire didn't just survive the 5 minutes, she conquered the entire evening. She met CEOs, gallery owners, trust fund babies with titles for last names, and won them over one by one. Her stories of snowy Valentine's Day deliveries and racing across the city with rose baskets had people laughing and leaning in. But what surprised her most wasn't the audience. It was Nathaniel. Every time she looked over, he was there. Not fake smiling, not acting, just watching her like he saw something new. Have you ever had a moment where pretending led to something unexpectedly real? Please comment below and like this video if you believe the best love stories start with honesty. Subscribe our channel now for more powerful story-based videos every day. By the end of the evening, Claire's hair was slightly damp, her coat still smelled faintly of lavender, and her cheeks ached from smiling. But what truly struck her wasn't the mansion or the lavish dinner or even the $500 offer she had almost forgotten to collect. It was how Nathaniel's parents looked at her, not with suspicion, but with a cautious admiration, and how Nathaniel himself never once let go of her hand during the awkward transitions between conversations, introductions, and tiny, elegant hors d'oeuvres served on porcelain trays worth more than her entire flower stall. Later, as the black SUV cruised back through the glimmering veins of Manhattan, Nathaniel looked at her, this time not as a man trying to escape a lie, but as someone clinging to something real for the first time in years. "Thank you for saving me tonight," he said softly as he opened the car door for her. She was silent, her eyes still scanning the city lights outside. Then, with a wry smile, she said, "You owe me more than a bouquet." Nathaniel laughed, the tension finally easing from his posture. I know, he admitted, but if I asked for a few more days, would you say yes? Her eyebrows lifted. How many minutes are we talking now? 2 weeks, he replied, as though he was offering her a dare. Until the Westwood Ala. My family thinks I'm about to announce an engagement, and I can't do that. There was a pause. 2 weeks sounded absurd, but absurdity was starting to feel like her new normal. And 2 weeks could mean new textbooks for Emily, rent paid ahead, a break from scraping together bouquet deliveries in the dead of winter. Claire nodded slowly. Fine, but no crossing any lines. I'm not a prop. Nathaniel looked genuinely relieved. I swear. And so it began, not just the continuation of a lie, but a gradual unraveling of everything Claire thought she knew about herself.
3 days later, Nathaniel showed up at her stall in jeans and a Henley, looking almost like a real person instead of the Wall Street phantom he was before. Under his arm, a folder, a coffee, and a sheepish grin. "We've got prep to do," he announced. Claire blinked. Prep? Dance lessons, etiquette classes, wardrobe consulting, the works. She stared at him. "You're joking." "Nope," he grinned. "Waltzing is non-negotiable at the gala." She groaned. "I can salsa, bachata, even throw down some cumbia. But a waltz? What am I, 80? Think of it as historical cosplay." The following week was a montage of chaos. She nearly broke his foot during their first dance class. She rolled her eyes so hard during etiquette training that the instructor gently asked if she needed to rest her vision. Nathaniel attempted to execute a European-style bow at one point and ended up almost kissing the floor, leaving Claire laughing so hard she had to sit down. But amid the awkward lessons, the mismatched shoes, the high society do's and don'ts, something warm began to bloom. It wasn't the grand fireworks of a sudden romance. It was subtler, like the smell of jasmine in spring that catches you off guard and lingers long after you've passed by. It was how Nathaniel listened when she spoke. Really listened. Not just with his ears, but with his eyes, his posture, his pauses. He looked at her like she wasn't a script to memorize or a role to fill. And for Claire, that was terrifying. Because real attention is rare. Real belief in someone, especially someone who doesn't wear designer heels or smile like she belongs on a magazine cover, that's dangerous. Because once you start believing someone sees you, you might start seeing yourself differently too. A week in, Claire made a decision. No more fancy restaurants this weekend. You're coming to my place. If I'm learning to waltz through your world, you need to know what it's like in mine. So he did. Nathaniel climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, where the paint chipped near the corners and the hallway smelled vaguely like pasta and wet laundry. Inside was a tiny living room, a battered couch, and walls lined with family photos and potted plants. But the smell of roasted garlic and fresh bread in the oven, that smell made Nathaniel feel like he hadn't breathed in weeks. Claire's younger sister, Emily, appeared wearing a tomato-stained hoodie and socks that didn't match. She sized him up like a hawk. "So you're the famous fake boyfriend?" Nathaniel chuckled. "Only for 2 weeks, contractually speaking." Dinner was chaotic, loud, and sincere. They passed around plates of food Claire had made from scratch. Chicken with lemon zest, roasted potatoes, a salad tossed with a vinaigrette that Nathaniel asked for the recipe. They talked about school, dreams, and everything in between. Emily opened up about her pre-med mind, how Claire gave up college to work the flower stand full-time after their parents died. Nathaniel listened, stunned, as he learned more about Claire in one meal than he had from any etiquette class or waltz spin.
Later that night, after dishes were done and Emily had retreated to her room to study, Claire and Nathaniel remained in the kitchen. The lighting was soft, casting long shadows on the walls. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full. "Sometimes," Claire whispered, "I thought my life would always be stuck in that market, delivering bouquets, collecting payments, making sure Emily had what she needed. No one ever asked what I wanted, and after a while, I stopped asking myself too." Nathaniel didn't speak. He just looked at her, really looked at her, like every cracked tile in her life was beautiful, like every sacrifice she had made mattered. "I used to dream of opening a real flower shop," she said, trying to smile. "A cooler for fresh blooms, a real counter, customers who came back every week, a little sign with my name on it." "Why'd you give it up?" he asked gently. "Because dreams don't pay bills," she said. "But at least they help me fall in love with what I do." Nathaniel swallowed hard. There was something about that sentence that lodged itself in his chest. Like she wasn't just talking about work. She was talking about her entire life, about survival, about choosing dignity over bitterness. And that was the moment, the exact moment, Nathaniel realized he wasn't pretending anymore. Not one bit. That moment of quiet honesty in Claire's kitchen could have been the beginning of something beautiful, if life had been fair. But life, especially in the upper circles of New York's elite, rarely works that way. Across the city, in a penthouse lined with marble floors and guarded by a concierge trained to ignore secrets, Charlotte Hayes was flipping through a thick stack of color photographs. Glossy, high resolution, invasive. They were images of Claire at her stall, of her laughing beside Nathaniel in dance class, of them stepping out of a restaurant, sharing an umbrella like something out of a rom-com. And then one particular photo, Nathaniel, soaked in the rain, down on one knee at the Brooklyn market. To an outsider, it looked romantic. To Charlotte, it looked like war. "It started as a joke," she muttered under her breath. Then she picked up her phone and called her private investigator. "Are you absolutely sure?" she asked coldly. Eyewitnesses at the market confirmed it. It started with a fake boyfriend request, one-time payment, then they extended the deal. There's no long-term relationship here, at least not originally. She didn't thank him. She didn't need confirmation. She needed control. Because Charlotte wasn't just another jealous ex. She was Nathaniel's expected. The woman society had hand-picked for him years ago. Their families played golf together, served on charity boards together, smiled in photo ops for business magazines. Nathaniel and Charlotte were supposed to be inevitable. And then this girl showed up, a florist with mud under her nails and nothing but audacity in her smile.
The next day, Claire found Charlotte waiting by her flower stand. Dressed in a camel trench coat, heels that weren't made for sidewalks, and a smile so sharp it could cut glass. "Claire, is it?" she said, as if trying out the name on her tongue. Claire looked up, instantly wary. "Can I help you?" Charlotte didn't waste time. She pulled a manila envelope from her purse and began to speak in a tone that was almost bored, like she was reading weather updates. "Your business license expired last month. Your tax filings haven't been submitted since the spring. I can call the city right now." Claire stared, the blood draining from her face. "You can't." "I can, and I will." "What do you want?" Charlotte took a slow breath, as if savoring the moment. "Nathaniel is mine. You were a distraction. You served your purpose, but this game ends now." Claire clenched her fists, struggling to remain calm. "He doesn't see it that way."
He's blinded by you. But I'm not, and neither is anyone in our world." She looked around the flower stall, then back at Claire with unmistakable disdain. "You're a glitch in the system, and glitches get fixed." Then she left, leaving behind a shattered silence, a creaky stall, and one impossible choice. It's in moments like these, when someone like Charlotte decides your existence is inconvenient, that the true cruelty of social hierarchy reveals itself. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about Nathaniel. It was about territory, about power, about a person who thought that her wealth gave her the right to edit other people out of the narrative, like smudges on a painting. And this is where the story stops being fiction for many people. In real life, we've seen countless situations like this. The student forced to give up a scholarship because they didn't have the right background. The talented artist denied access to galleries because they didn't know the right people. The single mom who's told she doesn't belong at certain schools or neighborhoods. It's the same story wrapped in different fabrics. You don't belong. You weren't invited. Your presence is an error. Claire spent the rest of that day trying to pretend she was okay, but the flowers in her hands felt heavy. The colors around her dimmed. She couldn't focus on customers, couldn't hold her scissors steady. Her mind kept replaying Charlotte's words like an echo she couldn't shake. That evening, Nathaniel stopped by unannounced. He saw her face before she could mask it. "Claire, what's wrong?" She sat down slowly on the edge of the stall's bench, twisting her fingers. "I think we should stop this." He froze. "What?" "The pretending. All of it." "Claire, what happened? Are you saying this because you want to, or because someone made you?" Her eyes flickered, pain swelling behind them, but she said nothing. In her mind, she pictured Emily, her smile after class, her arms full of medical books. Claire couldn't afford to let Charlotte ruin her sister's future, couldn't gamble her flower stand, couldn't risk everything they had worked so hard to hold together. So she lied with her silence. Nathaniel watched her, confused and devastated, as she slowly stood and turned away. He didn't chase her, not immediately, because when someone you love shuts a door in your face without an explanation, your first instinct isn't to break it down. It's to wonder if you deserved it. That night, at the Grand Westwood Gala, Nathaniel stood on stage beside Charlotte, dressed in tuxedos and fake smiles. All around them, guests clinked champagne glasses, whispering eagerly about an engagement announcement. But Nathaniel felt like he was trapped inside a movie he didn't audition for. Charlotte leaned over and whispered, "They're waiting." Nathaniel didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the crowd, and then he told the truth. "I know what you're expecting, but before I say anything else, I want to share something you didn't see." A lie was told, yes, but it wasn't by the person you think. The room fell to a hush. Everyone turned to look at him. Even Charlotte stiffened beside him. "She didn't break up with me. She was threatened, manipulated. Her business, her sister, everything she cares about was put on the line. And why? Because she doesn't come from our world?" Murmurs rippled across the room like waves. "Charlotte," he turned toward her, "do you deny it?" She straightened her posture, jaw clenched. "I did what I had to do. You'll thank me someday." "No." Another voice cut in. It was Robert Cross, Nathaniel's father. Stepping forward, his expression grave. "I've seen enough. Let's stop pretending. Nathaniel, go find her." And just like that, the room let out a collective exhale. The performance was over. Nathaniel ran from the gala without hesitation. No jacket, no umbrella. Just hope. The rain had returned, hard and fast, as if New York itself were rooting for something real to happen. He didn't stop. He ran through crosswalks, past honking taxis, ignoring the sting of water and wind on his skin. He ran until he reached Claire's flower stand. And there she was, organizing stems, fighting tears, pretending again to be okay. Nathaniel slowed down as he approached, completely soaked. His shirt clung to his chest, his shoes squelched on the pavement, but his eyes, those eyes, were burning with something fierce and honest. "Claire," he panted, "why didn't you tell me?" She turned away, the pain on her face too raw to hide. So he did the only thing that made sense. He dropped to one knee in the same spot he had knelt weeks ago, only this time, it wasn't for a charade. From his coat, he pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a simple gold ring. No diamonds, no sparkle, just a tiny inscription. "For everything real. I'm sorry for not running after you sooner, for not protecting what mattered most. And now I'm asking, Claire Bennett, will you spend the rest of your life with me, not as a story, not as a lie, but as something honest?" Claire stared at the ring, breath caught in her throat. A month ago, she was just a florist in Brooklyn. Now she was kneeling in the rain with the man she had once called a stranger, holding something far more precious than jewelry, a choice. She whispered, "Yes."
The rain didn't let up that day, not when Nathaniel stood up, soaked and shaking, nor when Claire whispered her yes. But somehow, the rain felt like a baptism, a washing away of lies, pretenses, and fear. What was left, standing between them, was just truth. Humble, trembling, unmistakable. They didn't rush into planning. There were no diamond-studded invitations or six-tier cakes. When the day came, it was nothing like the events Claire used to deliver flowers to. No extravagant gowns, no choreographed fireworks. Just family, a few close friends, and dozens of wildflower bouquets arranged by Claire's own hands. They married in Central Park, on a small stone platform surrounded by trees, with the morning light filtering softly through the leaves. Claire wore a minimalist white lace dress, her hair pinned up with fresh flowers prepared that morning by herself and Elaine. Yes, that Elaine. The woman who once looked at Claire like a curiosity now called her my daughter. Nathaniel wore a navy blue suit, classic and simple. His eyes never left Claire's as she walked toward him. When it came time for their vows, Claire's voice trembled, not from nerves, but from the sheer weight of everything they'd lived through. "I don't promise to be perfect," she began, "but I promise to always be honest. I promise to believe in you, to stand beside you, in your strength and in your vulnerability. I promise to remember that this love began as something unexpected, but exists now because we can't imagine life without each other." Nathaniel looked at her, eyes misting. "I promise to love you not only on the easy days, but especially
on the hard ones. I promise to listen, not just to your words, but to the things you're afraid to say. I promise to show up, even in the rain, especially when it matters. They kissed, not for show, not for the cameras, but because they couldn't not. It was a kiss full of every unspoken moment, every tear withheld, every smile earned. A year later, Claire Bennett's life looked very different, but not because of the wedding photos or the ring on her finger. It was different because of the purpose she carried now. She was no longer just a florist. She was now the Director of Community Development at the Westwood Group, a position personally created by Robert Cross after witnessing her gift for connecting with people from every walk of life. Claire didn't climb the corporate ladder the usual way. She built a new one from the ground up, with grit, empathy, and fresh ideas. From her modest apartment in Queens, yes, she still kept it, Claire oversaw programs that connected donors with underserved neighborhoods, launched micro-grant initiatives for women-owned businesses, and introduced practical education programs in schools that had been overlooked for too long. Her sister Emily was now a pediatric intern at St. Luke's Hospital, walking the halls in scrubs with a badge that read, "Emily Bennett, MD, in training." Every time she looked down at her badge, she whispered, "My sister made the impossible possible. Now it's my turn." And Claire? She still arranged flowers every weekend, not for money, for herself, for joy, for memory. Sometimes she would sit at the kitchen table, the sunlight streaming in, and trace her fingers over the tiny engraving inside her ring. For everything real. Because that's what they'd built. Not a fantasy, not a trophy marriage, not a deal, but something real. And it had cost them everything they once clung to for safety. But that's the truth no one tells you about love. It's not just something you fall into. It's something you fight for. It's something you build, brick by quiet brick, word by difficult word. One evening, Claire and Nathaniel were walking through the market where it all began. They stopped under the same awning where she had once tried to shield her stand from the storm. The tarp was gone now, replaced by a new metal frame and a clean wooden sign that read, "Bennett Blooms." She hadn't dreamed it. She'd done it. "Did you ever think," Claire asked, brushing her fingers over a bundle of fresh eucalyptus, "that one little lie could lead to a real marriage?" Nathaniel smiled and took her hand. It wasn't a lie. It was bravery. We were both brave that night. And he was right. Because pretending to be something you're not, that's easy. But choosing to be real, when the world tries to edit you out, that takes courage. So here's what we take from Claire and Nathaniel's story. Life doesn't hand us fairy tales. It hands us moments, awkward, messy, sometimes rainy ones, and asks us what we'll do with them. Maybe you've been told you don't belong, that your dreams are too small, your background too humble, your presence a mistake in someone else's polished life. But Claire proved something powerful. Authenticity is your superpower. You don't need the perfect shoes, the perfect past, or the perfect plan. What you need is the ability to show up for yourself, even when no one else does. The bravery to say yes to the unknown. The strength to walk into a room that wasn't built for you and own it. And most importantly, the love you truly deserve won't ask you to change. It will recognize you as you are, maybe in a storm, maybe in mud-splattered shoes, maybe after you've stopped believing love is for people like you. But when it comes, you'll know. And when it's real, no one can take it from you. If you loved this story, be sure to subscribe to John Stories channel for more emotional, powerful, and unforgettable tales. We release new content every day that reminds you love is still out there, and your story is worth telling. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are never too small to matter, and never too late to begin again.
Sometimes love ends not with shouting, betrayal, or explosive heartbreak, but in silence. A silence so deafening, it swallows everything that once made two people feel alive. This is the story of Ethan and Emily, a couple who had everything until they didn't. A signature was all it took to mark the death of a marriage, yet just minutes after the ink dried, fate threw them into a plot twist no one could have written. She collapsed in the cold, sterile room where their love officially ended. He rushed to her side, panic breaking through his normally impenetrable exterior. And what doctors would reveal next would not only shake him, it would rewrite the very ending he thought he had just sealed. Emily was pregnant, 3 months along, with Ethan's child, a baby conceived amidst chaos, confusion, and the slow breakdown of something that once felt eternal. But here's the catch. This isn't just a story about unexpected pregnancy or failed love. This is a story about power, redemption, control, vulnerability, and what it takes to truly change, not for a second chance, but to earn the right to stand beside someone you've already hurt. And it might just change how you see the ones you've let go. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to John's Stories channel for powerful emotional narratives like this every day.
The scent of paper and bureaucracy hung in the air like dust in sunlight. Emily sat with her back rigid, facing the man she once swore forever to. Across the lifeless wooden table, Ethan sat stone-faced, his dark eyes unreadable, the stack of divorce papers separating them like a final symbolic wall. There was no tears, no final plea, just silence. And that was the worst part, because when there's nothing left to say, that's when it's truly over. Emily clenched the pen not because she was unsure, but because her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Her name was already printed on the document, bold and lifeless. She just had to sign, and so did he. Ethan picked up the pen like he was signing a business contract. No hesitation, no flicker of emotion. That was his strength and his curse. He was always composed, always in control. But as his signature met hers, something broke. Not between them, because what they had was already broken, but within her. When Emily stood, her world tilted sideways. A sharp ringing filled her ears, and before she could reach for balance, her knees buckled and she collapsed to the cold floor. The thud was like an explosion in Ethan's chest. For the first time in years, the man who prided himself on calm lost it. "Emily," he shouted, kneeling by her side, shaking her gently. "Talk to me." She didn't respond. Her lips were pale, her breathing shallow. Ethan cradled her head, his voice shaking as he barked for help. Registry office staff scrambled to call an ambulance, but to him it felt like the world had stopped. As they loaded her into the ambulance, he never let go of her hand. Here was the woman he had just legally separated from, and yet the idea of losing her tore through him in a way he couldn't rationalize. He thought he had closed this chapter, but watching her unconscious, fragile, pale, it felt like watching someone erase your favorite book in front of your eyes. At the hospital, antiseptic air mixed with the beeping of machines and the low murmur of nurses. Emily stirred, blinking against the white lights overhead. Her vision was blurry, her mind slow to catch up. But one thing was clear. Ethan was still there. His previously pristine suit was wrinkled, his tie undone, his eyes wide and haunted. Before she could speak, the doctor entered. "Miss Emily," he said gently, clipboard in hand, "your fainting was caused by a sudden drop in blood pressure, likely due to your condition." Emily frowned. "What condition?" The doctor hesitated, then offered a soft smile. "You're pregnant, about 12 weeks along. Congratulations." The room was silent, utterly still. Even the machine seemed to pause. Emily stared at him, blinking, like her brain couldn't process the words. Pregnant? No, that couldn't be right. She had dismissed the fatigue, the nausea. She had assumed it was the stress of the divorce,
the emotional weight of years unraveling. But now it all made sense. The baby was real, inside her. Her eyes slowly drifted to Ethan, who had gone pale. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Because in that moment, everything between them shifted. The story they thought was over suddenly had a second chapter. Ethan took a step toward her, voice low. "This is our child, Emily." It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a threat. It was a truth. Emily looked away. Her heart raced. She didn't want this complication. Not now. Not with him. "This changes nothing," she said, quietly, trying to sound firm, but her voice wavered, and Ethan noticed. He always noticed. The slightest tremor in her tone, the way her hands clutched the hospital sheets, the way her eyes refused to meet his. She was scared. Not of motherhood, not even of the future. She was scared of him, of what he still meant to her. Real-life echoes of this scene are more common than we think. I once spoke to a woman named Natalie who left a controlling partner after 5 years. They had been college sweethearts, raised a dog together, shared rent, and even planned a wedding that never happened. But it wasn't until she fainted from exhaustion and learned she was pregnant that she had to decide if she could rebuild something with the man who had broken her spirit. Her answer, like Emily's, wasn't simple. Back in the hospital room, Ethan took another step forward. Emily caught the scent of his cologne, a scent that once made her feel safe, a scent that still lived in her bedsheets even after he moved out, and she hated how familiar it still felt. "I don't need you for this, Ethan," she said. Her voice was stronger now, defensive. But he didn't back down. "I'm not here to interfere. I'm here because I'm the father." She turned away, arms folded. He knew that look, that wall she always built when she felt cornered. "Do you really think you can shut me out of this?" he asked. "I don't know what I'm doing. I just need time." It was the first honest thing she had said to him in months. And to his surprise, he didn't push, he didn't lecture or argue. He just said, "I'm not going anywhere." That terrified her more than anything else. Because despite all the pain, despite all the history, a part of her still wanted to believe him.
Emily closed her eyes and tried to breathe through the storm brewing inside her chest. Ethan's voice echoed in her ears, not for its tone, but for the calm insistence in it. "I'm not going anywhere." It sounded like a promise, but promises had always been easy for him to make, and devastating for her to believe. Their history wasn't laced with fireworks and drama. It had been a slow erosion of freedom, of choices, of her identity. Ethan had never raised his voice. He never needed to. A glance, a small sigh, or a carefully chosen phrase was enough to make her second-guess herself. "You don't need to work. I can provide everything for us." "That dress is a bit revealing, don't you think? I just want what's best for you." In the early days, she'd mistaken it all for care, for attention, for love. But slowly, over the years, his love had started to feel like a cage lined with silk. It looked beautiful from the outside, but inside, it suffocated. So when she asked for space the first time, he laughed, like she had just told him she wanted to live on Mars. The second time, he changed the subject. The third time, when she finally uttered the word divorce, he had stared at her in silence before muttering, "I don't know what else you want from me. I gave you everything." But that was the problem. It had always been him giving, and her receiving. She had been a recipient of his life, not a partner in it. Back in the hospital, Ethan was still standing near her bed, unsure whether to reach for her hand or step away. The lines between them were no longer legal documents. They were emotional landmines. "I don't hate you,"
Emily whispered. He blinked. Then what? That's the problem, she said, her voice barely audible. I wish I did. It would make this easier. He stepped back as if her words had weight, and in a way they did. Not hating someone you're trying to walk away from is a curse, because it leaves space for hope. And hope is dangerous. Ethan had always lived by logic. His world was built on clear expectations and outcomes. But now he stood in unfamiliar territory, where love wasn't a chess match, where the queen had left the board and the king no longer knew how to move. He crossed his arms across his chest, posture tight. He said, I can't fix the past, but I can be here now. Emily didn't respond. Her gaze fell to the floor, to the white linoleum that somehow felt more stable than his presence. You don't believe I've changed, he said, watching her. She inhaled deeply and exhaled even slower. I think you want to be someone else, but I don't know if it's for me or for you. And that was a question few people asked in the aftermath of heartbreak. Do people change because they've grown, or because they want to win someone back? The days after the hospital visit blurred into a haze of fatigue and routine. Emily, now aware of the life growing inside her, found herself making choices not for herself anymore, but for the child. Prenatal appointments, supplements, rest. Ethan didn't push. He didn't demand answers or timelines. He was just there. When morning sickness struck, he'd leave a bland cracker pack and a bottle of water on her doorstep, then disappear before she woke. When she had a migraine, he'd text, I'm downstairs with ginger tea, no pressure. And slowly, the quiet presence of a man who once loomed like a shadow now felt more like a lighthouse, distant, constant, guiding, but not controlling. One cold evening after a long workday, Emily stepped out of her office to find Ethan leaning against his car. His arms were folded, his jaw tense. What are you doing here? She asked, clutching her coat tighter. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. She didn't respond. Do I have a chance? He asked softly. Emily looked away, her breath fogging the winter air. I don't know. Then I'll wait. His words weren't filled with desperation. They didn't feel like a plea. They were simple, clear. That night, for the first time since everything unraveled, Emily cried. Not because she was sad, but because she was finally allowed to feel again. She let him walk her to her door. She accepted the coffee he handed her the next morning. She let him carry the grocery bag when her arms were full. Small acts of presence, not dominance. And he never asked for anything in return. Real stories like this are more common than we think, but rarely told. I met a man named Trevor at a writer's retreat in Oregon. He told me how he lost his wife after years of passive control, not shouting or cheating, but through silence, withdrawal, and decisions made for her own good. When she left, he didn't chase her. He became a different man, not to win her back, but because he hated who he'd become. Years later, she returned, not because he asked her to, but because she saw the change without him ever announcing it. Back to Emily. Just as things began to settle into a cautious rhythm, everything unraveled again. It was a regular day, a prenatal checkup, The baby was healthy. Emily felt a rare sense of peace as she walked outside. She spotted Ethan across the street. She smiled automatically until she saw his expression darken. He walked towards her, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Who was that guy?" he asked. Emily frowned. "What guy? The one you were talking to in the lobby?" She blinked. "An old friend. We bumped into each other." "Oh, right," he said, the edge in his voice unmistakable. "A coincidence, like the ones that used to happen before." Her chest tightened. "Ethan, no." He cut her off, his voice rising slightly. "The same guy who always waited for me to screw up so he could swoop in. You still trust people like that?" Her face fell. The past had returned, not through action, but tone, accusation, mistrust, the very poison that once ruined them. "I'm not doing this again," she said coldly. He realized his mistake too late. She was already walking away. He tried to stop her. "You said I changed." "You promised you changed," she said over her shoulder. "But you don't get to be a better man only when it's convenient." That night, he came to her apartment. The lights were off. A neighbor said she had rented the apartment out for a few months, said she was traveling. Emily was gone, really gone this time. And this time, she didn't leave a door cracked open behind her. Ethan stood outside the apartment building, breath visible in the night air. For once, he didn't know what to do. He couldn't plan or calculate. All the control he'd clung to his entire life meant nothing now. Weeks passed. No calls, no messages, no signs of her. And then the call came. A number lit up on his phone in the middle of the night. St. Jude Medical Center. He picked up, already breathless. "Mr. Ethan?" "Yes, what happened?" "It's about Emily. You need to come now."
The hospital smelled the same as before. Sterile, cold, filled with fluorescent light and quiet dread. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he approached the reception desk, a sensation that felt entirely foreign to a man who prided himself on composure. When the nurse directed him to the maternity ICU, his heart nearly burst through his chest. "Condition is delicate," they told him. Delicate. The word looped in his head like a cruel chant. It meant nothing and everything. It was the kind of word doctors used to avoid saying worse ones. It was the same kind of word he used to use in business meetings, non-committal, vague, and devastatingly effective. The minutes crawled by, stretching into an eternity. Sitting in the hallway outside her room, Ethan stared at the tiled floor, trying to hold himself together. For a man who once thought love was weakness, it was humbling to realize that now, love was the only thing keeping him upright. Inside that room, behind a door he wasn't allowed to open yet, was the woman who had walked out of his life and taken a part of him with her. He couldn't strategize his way out of this. He couldn't fix her with grand gestures. There were no second chances if fate decided it was done playing fair. And then the door opened. A nurse stepped out, followed by a quiet hum of monitors still beeping inside. Ethan stood. "She's stable," the nurse said gently. "She's very weak, but she and the baby, they're both okay." He didn't move at first. The words didn't register immediately. And then, she survived. Emily was alive. So was their child. When he entered the room, the sight of her nearly dropped him to his knees. She was pale, eyes heavy with exhaustion. But she was there. Her presence, though frail, was undeniable. Their eyes met. It wasn't relief she offered him, not entirely. It was something more complex. There was gratitude in her gaze, yes, but also confusion and a subtle wall that still hadn't come down. She whispered, "You chose the baby." Ethan stepped closer. "I chose what you would have chosen." That single moment,
those few words, said more than any vow he had ever spoken. Because this time, his decision wasn't about control. It wasn't about his pride or his plan. It was about her, about choosing the thing that mattered most to her even when she wasn't awake to fight for it. The next few months blurred into a stream of healing and change. Emily had a long recovery ahead. The emergency had been a placental abruption brought on by stress. The baby, a boy, had spent weeks in neonatal observation, but he grew stronger by the day. They named him Matthew, a name Emily had once casually mentioned in passing when they were still married. He remembered. He didn't try to rename him. He didn't even suggest alternatives. For once, he didn't challenge her choices. He just stood by them. And that, strangely, became the first sign that something inside him had shifted. This wasn't the same man who had dismissed her needs for years. This wasn't the man who calculated outcomes and defended his ego to the death. This Ethan was quieter, present, patient, and he never asked for forgiveness. He didn't push for anything. He didn't try to resume where they left off. He just waited. When Emily struggled to carry the baby bag into the car, he appeared silently and took it from her hand. When she returned from appointments, exhausted and emotional, he didn't offer solutions. He offered tea. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't performative. It was real. And Emily noticed. She noticed how, for the first time in years, her choices were hers alone. Ethan didn't fill the silences with suggestions or challenge her instincts. He watched, supported, and left space. It was disarming, because Ethan had always been about control, and now he was about trust. I remember once hearing a therapist say, the hardest part of healing from an emotionally imbalanced relationship isn't the absence of love, it's learning to trust peace when you've lived so long inside chaos. That was Emily's reality. She had adapted to imbalance. Now this calm felt suspicious. So she watched Ethan closely. She observed how he held Matthew, not like a man performing fatherhood, but like someone discovering it, layer by layer. She watched his hands, once rigid with certainty, now trembling slightly as they adjusted the baby's cap. She caught the way he whispered nonsense to our son in the early mornings, thinking she couldn't hear him. One day, their arms brushed as they both reached for a bottle. It was such an insignificant touch, and yet Emily's heart skipped. Because the skin remembers, and so does the soul. When she looked up, he was already watching her. They held that gaze for several seconds. A quiet question floated in the space between them. Could we ever be us again? But Emily looked away. Not yet. Still, something had changed. She was no longer running. She was simply walking at her own pace. That was new. But time, as it tends to do, was running ahead of them. That night, after putting Matthew to sleep, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He asked for nothing, but he leaned in, gently kissed her forehead, and stepped back. And that's when Emily finally understood something essential. They weren't rebuilding a relationship because they needed each other. They were beginning again because they wanted each other. That was the difference. Not convenience, not desperation. Desire. Mutual choice. In my experience, the strongest relationships aren't always the ones that last uninterrupted. They're often the ones that fall apart and are rebuilt with new bricks. Not because the old ones were bad, but because the foundation had to change. That's what happened here. Ethan had finally learned that love isn't about control, it's about freedom. And Emily? She learned that vulnerability is only dangerous when handed to the wrong person. The right one guards it like treasure.
The morning light filtered softly through the curtains of Emily's apartment, casting golden streaks across the floor. The scent of oatmeal and cinnamon drifted from the kitchen where Ethan was humming a lullaby, absent-mindedly, almost uncharacteristically, as he fed Matthew tiny spoonfuls. It was domestic, ordinary, and profoundly surreal. Emily stood at the doorframe, quietly watching him. She hadn't planned to let him stay over. It had just
happened. A late-night fever in Matthew. Ethan had come over to help, and when the crisis passed, no one had the energy to untangle themselves from the moment. But now, as she watched him move through her kitchen like he belonged there, something deeper stirred. Not the blind passion that once made her overlook the cracks in their relationship, but something calmer, steadier, built on observation, patience, and evidence. That was what mattered most. Consistency. He wasn't perfect. She didn't expect him to be. But day by day, Ethan had shown her something more valuable than declarations or promises. He had shown up. And that, to a woman who once begged to be heard, meant everything. Still, the walls she had built didn't crumble overnight. Healing is not linear. There were moments when old fears crept in, when his silence made her wonder if judgment lurked underneath, when a small sigh would echo a time he'd tried to control her with disappointment. But something was different now. When she expressed those fears aloud, he didn't defend himself. He listened. He said, "You have every right to feel that way." He said, "I'm not here to prove anything overnight. I just want to earn tomorrow." That line stayed with her. I just want to earn tomorrow. One afternoon, she found herself telling him about a new job opportunity, a position she had once dreamed of, but one that would take her to another city for a few weeks of training. Ethan didn't flinch. "Take it," he said without hesitation. "I'll help however I can." She studied his face for traces of old patterns, resentment, manipulation, guilt. There was none. "Why?" she asked softly. "Because you deserve a life that's yours." Emily looked away quickly, not wanting him to see her eyes well up. Because that was it. That was the one thing she had needed for years. Not perfection, not flowers, not grand gestures, just freedom. And someone who respected it. She accepted the job. He watched Matthew while she was away, sent her updates, never once crossed a line, never once used his time with their son as leverage. Instead, he became what he never had the courage to be before: a real partner, a steady parent, a present man. And it didn't go unnoticed. On her first night back, she didn't sleep in her room. She didn't say anything. She just walked into the living room where Ethan was dozing with Matthew on his chest, gently picked up their son, placed him in the crib, and returned to sit beside Ethan on the couch. He opened one eye, sleep-blurred, confused. "Do you want to stay the night?" she asked, almost timidly. He nodded, afraid words would break the moment. They didn't kiss, not that night, but something much deeper passed between them, mutual permission to try again. In the weeks that followed, they didn't make a big announcement. There were no social media posts, no declarations to family. It was private, sacred, something they were rebuilding from the inside, piece by piece. They went to counseling, not because something was broken, but because they both wanted tools to prevent old habits from resurfacing. They took turns with midnight feedings. They argued, but gently. They laughed, but not like before. It was a different kind of laughter now, one born not of flirtation, but of familiarity. Real life had returned, but this time it didn't feel like a threat. One spring evening, they went for a walk with Matthew in a stroller. The air smelled like honeysuckle, and birds chirped from trees that had just begun to bloom. "I don't know what the future holds," she said suddenly, not looking at him. Ethan didn't rush to reassure her.
He didn't say, "Don't worry," or "We're fine." He said, "I don't either, but I'm walking toward it with you." That was the night she kissed him again. Not out of impulse, not out of longing, but out of love. Because she finally believed him, and maybe more importantly, she believed herself. So, what's the takeaway here? Is it that love always deserves a second chance? No, not always. Some people don't change. Some wounds don't heal. Some goodbyes are permanent, for good reason. But this story isn't about the kind of love that bends until it breaks. It's about the kind of love that shatters and then gets reassembled, stronger, wiser, gentler. If you're watching this and you've walked away from someone you once thought you'd grow old with, remember this: leaving isn't failure. Sometimes it's the first courageous act of love toward yourself. But if they come back changed, not for you, but for themselves. If they come back with open hands instead of closed fists, with understanding instead of defenses, and if your heart is healed enough to listen again, then maybe, just maybe, the story's not over. Maybe, like Emily and Ethan, it's only just beginning again. Love is not about proving someone wrong. It's about showing up differently the second time, because now you know better. You don't get the same love twice, but if you're lucky, you get a better version the second time. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, please consider subscribing to John Stories for more emotional narratives that remind us of the messy, beautiful, and complicated nature of the human heart. We publish new content every day, stories that make you feel, think, and maybe heal. Until next time, take care of your heart.
They said she had it all: beauty, grace, elegance. The kind of woman fairy tales are written about. But what they didn't know was how quickly a dream could curdle into a nightmare. On the night of her wedding, a night that should have been dipped in golden memories, Emma Whitmore stood alone in a mansion soaked in silence. Her husband, the charming, mysterious billionaire who had promised to shield her from the harshness of the world, walked into their bedroom, not with passion, but with poison. What he said next shattered every illusion she had ever held about love. He hadn't married her for love. He hadn't even married her for companionship. He had married her for revenge. And suddenly the diamond ring on her finger felt like a shackle. But here's the twist. Behind every calculated betrayal lies a hidden truth. And behind every man hardened by hate is a heart waiting to break. This is not just a love story. It's a story of vengeance, resilience, and redemption. A tale that asks, can you truly heal the heart of the man who broke yours? And more importantly, should you? Stay with us, because this story doesn't just twist, it spirals. It descends into betrayal and rises toward forgiveness in ways you'll never expect. And by the end, you might just find yourself asking, if you were in Emma's shoes, would you have the strength to walk away or the courage to stay? Welcome to John Stories channel, where romantic tales are brought to life with heart and soul. Immerse yourself in a world of emotions, where every voice brings you closer to heartfelt, unforgettable love stories. If you enjoy romantic audio stories, don't forget to subscribe our channel for more powerful stories about love, self-growth, and human connection, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next emotional journey. Emma Whitmore
had grown up believing in love the way others believed in gravity, something constant, something real. Raised in the aristocratic halls of her family's estate, she had been taught poise, dignity, and the delicate art of endurance. But nothing could have prepared her for Nathaniel Cross. Nathaniel was not just a man. He was a presence, a billionaire entrepreneur with eyes like a thunderstorm and a demeanor that made people lean in when he spoke. He first entered her life during a charity gala, a shimmering night of champagne and shallow conversations. She had been standing awkwardly by a statue of some long-forgotten general, feigning interest, when she felt someone watching her. "You don't seem to be enjoying the event," came a voice beside her, deep, composed, like it didn't belong in the same room as these idle elites. Emma turned, and there he was, tall, sharply dressed, with a face so striking it seemed painted in shadows and steel. She tried to offer a polite smile, the kind she'd mastered, but the words caught in her throat. He was intense, and when their eyes met, it was like the moment before lightning strikes, quiet, electric, and terrifyingly unpredictable. From that moment on, Nathaniel became a fixture in her life. Flowers arrived without cards. He'd show up at her family's dinners, their business events, always with the same enigmatic charm. To outsiders, he was the perfect suitor. To Emma, he was a riddle she wanted desperately to solve. Her parents adored him, and why wouldn't they? The Whitmores had been on the verge of financial ruin, their company bleeding money after a string of risky investments. Nathaniel's interest in their daughter had felt like divine intervention. With his wealth and reputation, he could restore everything they had lost. It wasn't just about love, it was about legacy. But Emma did love him, or at least she thought she did. Every detail of his attention, every carefully placed compliment, every meaningful glance made her believe she was seen in a way no one else had ever managed. When he proposed, during a stormy night, rain sliding down the windows of a private suite, it wasn't really a question. He didn't ask. He told her, "Emma, I want you to be my wife." She said yes. Of course she did. Because at that point, saying no would have felt like stepping off the edge of the only world she knew. The wedding was nothing short of a spectacle, held in an opulent cathedral adorned with cascading white roses, shimmering crystal chandeliers, and paparazzi flashing from every angle. Emma wore a dress that floated like mist, lace, silk, and hope stitched into every seam. Nathaniel, in his black tailored suit, looked like something from another era, confident, composed, a king claiming his queen. But even then, in the briefest flicker of his expression, Emma caught something else. A shadow behind his smile, a clenched jaw, an invisible wall. She ignored it. She told herself it was just nerves. Everyone gets nervous on their wedding day. And maybe that was true. But nerves didn't explain what happened after. That night, in the honeymoon suite designed to cradle a new beginning, Emma waited. Candles glowed softly. Rose petals were strewn across the bed in cliché but beautiful patterns. She had changed into a pale blue silk robe, her hands trembling slightly, her heart racing not with fear but anticipation. And then he walked in. Nathaniel didn't smile, didn't speak for a long moment, just stood there, his hands buried in his jacket pockets, staring at her like she was a painting he didn't remember commissioning. "It's late," he finally said. Emma smiled, trying to melt the tension. "Yes, but it's our first night as husband and wife." He didn't respond. Instead, he pulled off his jacket and tossed it over a chair, loosened his tie, walked past her. "Nathaniel?" she asked, her voice small, uncertain. And then he turned, and everything changed. "You really believed this, didn't you?" His tone was bitter, sharp, and cold enough to pierce bone. Emma's heart dropped. "Believed what?" "The fairy tale, the perfect romance, that I ever loved you." Those words hit her like a slap. She couldn't speak, barely breathe. "This marriage,"
he continued, stepping closer, was never about love. It was about revenge. Emma backed away, the blood draining from her face. "I don't understand." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Your father destroyed mine, drove him into bankruptcy, humiliated him so completely that he took his own life." She gasped, her entire body trembling. "You didn't know?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "Of course you didn't. The Whitmores don't deal in consequences, just profit." Emma shook her head, too stunned to speak. And then he said the words that would haunt her forever.
"So now you get to suffer." Emma stood frozen in the candlelight, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her soul. It wasn't just what Nathaniel said, it was how he said it. Without hesitation, without mercy, as if her very existence was an offense he had waited years to punish. She tried to make sense of it, her mind racing, grasping for any memory, any moment that might have hinted at his hatred. But there was nothing. No red flags, no sharp words, only the flawless illusion of love. And now that illusion was crumbling right in front of her. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It doesn't matter," he replied flatly. "You carry his name. That's enough." This moment, this shattering of everything she thought she knew, is something that many people, especially women, quietly live through. When the person you trust the most reveals that the trust was never mutual. In real life, it might not be about revenge, but manipulation, control, or some hidden agenda. And often it's only when you're already bound, by marriage, by children, by shared lives, that the mask slips. Emma was no exception, but what she did next would set her apart. She didn't collapse into tears. She didn't scream or beg. She simply stood there, her heart breaking in silence, as Nathaniel turned and walked out of the room, leaving her in the soft glow of what was supposed to be their beginning. That night, Emma didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her wedding gown, staring at the ring on her finger. A ring that now felt like a trap. The petals on the bed mocked her. Every stitch of her dress, every diamond in her necklace all whispered the same thing. You were played. In the days that followed, Emma wandered the mansion like a ghost. Nathaniel didn't hurt her physically. He didn't need to. The silence was enough. He barely looked at her, barely acknowledged her presence, and when he did, it was with the same icy detachment as a man reading stock numbers. She tried to speak to him once, in the dining room over breakfast. He didn't even glance up from his paper. This is the thing about emotional abuse. It's subtle. It's not always screaming matches or bruises. Sometimes it's the absence of kindness. The deliberate indifference, the calculated withholding of affection. And it chips away at you until you start questioning your own worth. But even in that darkness, something inside Emma began to shift. She noticed things. The way Nathaniel would pause for just a second when he saw her crying. The way he had the gardeners replant the rose bushes she liked. The way he hesitated before shutting his office door. Small, almost imperceptible signs that beneath his armor, something wasn't as dead as he pretended. Still, she refused to be a prisoner of someone else's unresolved trauma. So one evening, with a defiance she hadn't felt in weeks, she confronted him again, this time in his study. "I want the truth," she said, stepping inside and shutting the door behind her. He didn't turn to look at her. "I already gave you the truth." "No," she replied. "You gave me pain. I want the full story. I want to know what my father did. I want to understand." For the first time, he turned. His expression was guarded, but not unreadable. "He destroyed my family."
he said quietly. My father trusted him, went into a business deal with him. Your father pulled out at the last moment, tanking the entire project and letting ours take the fall. My dad lost everything. His company, his reputation, his pride. And when the banks came knocking, when the media crucified him, he couldn't take it. Nathaniel's voice faltered. He jumped from the roof of our house. My mother found him. I was 16. Emma's stomach twisted. She'd grown up hearing her father talk about ruthless negotiations, the necessary cruelty of business, but she had never imagined the human cost behind those deals. I'm sorry, she said softly. It doesn't change anything, he muttered. No, she said, but it should. There was a long silence between them, one thick with unspoken pain. And maybe in that moment, he saw her not as a symbol of his revenge, but as a woman, tangled in the web of someone else's sins just like him. Later that night, she found herself walking alone in the garden. The wind was sharp, slicing through her thin coat, but she welcomed it. It was the first time she had felt anything in days. You'll catch a cold, Nathaniel said from behind. She didn't turn. I prefer the cold. He didn't reply. Just stood there in silence, watching her. And this time it wasn't the cold stare of vengeance. It was something else. Something conflicted. That night marked the beginning of a strange in-between. Nathaniel stopped ignoring her, but he didn't engage either. They existed like two planets caught in the same orbit, but spinning on different axes. Sometimes Emma would catch him watching her when she thought she wasn't looking, his expression unreadable. And then came the night that changed everything. It was late. Emma had fallen asleep in the library, curled up on the couch with a book in her lap. She didn't hear the door open, didn't see Nathaniel step inside, but she felt it when he lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bedroom. She felt the warmth of his hands, the tremor in his breath. She felt something real. He didn't speak, just laid her down gently and pulled the blanket over her. But he stood there for a long time afterward, watching her sleep. People often say that love and hate are two sides of the same coin, that they burn with the same intensity, that one can bleed into the other. And maybe that's what was happening. Maybe Nathaniel's rage was giving way to the very thing he had tried so hard to suppress. Because the next night, it happened. It wasn't planned, it wasn't soft, it wasn't even kind. But it was real. He kissed her, hard, desperate, as if trying to erase every line between revenge and desire. Emma resisted at first. She pushed against his chest, but then something inside her broke too. She had spent so long being unloved, unseen, and now in the heat of that moment, they were both stripped of their lies. They made love with the intensity of two people who had been drowning in silence. And for a brief, fleeting moment, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. But fairy tales don't rewrite themselves in one night. The next morning, Nathaniel was cold again, formal, distant. He wouldn't look at her, wouldn't speak. And when she asked if what happened meant anything, he simply replied, "Don't mistake a moment of weakness for something meaningful." Those words cut deeper than any lie. Emma didn't cry, not this time. She just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, with a quiet resolve, she said, "Then I'm done being weak too."
Emma didn't slam the door when she left the bedroom. She didn't raise her voice or make a scene. That wasn't her style anymore. She had learned something powerful in that moment, that silence can be louder than rage, and dignity can sting more than revenge. Nathaniel didn't follow her, Maybe he thought she was bluffing. Maybe he didn't care. Or maybe, deep down, he feared the part of himself that had begun to want her. She spent the following days in quiet preparation. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She packed. Slowly. Thoughtfully. She called her mother, discreetly, from the far end of the estate garden where the security cameras didn't reach. Her mother's voice trembled on the phone, not with fear, but with a kind of knowing sadness. She had always suspected the Cross marriage wasn't built on love, but like many high society mothers, she had chosen to hope for the best. "A car will be waiting by the east gate, before sunrise. Just go. Don't say goodbye." Emma closed her eyes, nodded silently to herself, and whispered, "Thank you." We often think of escape as something messy, midnight fights, bags thrown out of windows. But sometimes, the most powerful escapes are the quietest. Emma made no dramatic declarations. She didn't leave a note. She simply stopped engaging. The house became a shell again, except this time, she wasn't the one haunted. It was Nathaniel who began to feel the silence. He noticed her absence even before she left. Her eyes no longer searched for his. She no longer flinched when he walked into a room. She didn't try to fix anything. And that disturbed him. Control was what Nathaniel had always relied on. Not just over her, but over himself, over his businesses, his image, the narrative he crafted so meticulously. But now, the woman he had lured into a cage was no longer rattling the bars. She was simply planning to leave. He couldn't explain the tension in his chest every time she passed him without a word. He told himself it was frustration, annoyance, wounded pride. But none of those things explained why he lingered outside her bedroom door some nights, wondering if she still cried herself to sleep. And then, she was gone. The bed was made. The drawers were half open. Her favorite scarf was missing from the coat rack. Nathaniel walked into the room and knew instantly she had left him. At first, he stood frozen. For a man who controlled billion-dollar empires, who commanded boardrooms and press rooms with equal ease, he looked helpless. There was no one to shout at, no one to blame, only the echo of his own mistakes. He ran through the hallways calling her name. His voice, once cold and commanding, cracked with something raw, desperation. But the house gave him no answers. Out on the front steps, he stared at the horizon, watching the dawn break over the fields, and realized the sun was rising without her. For the first time, Nathaniel Cross experienced true loss. Not business, not money, but the loss of someone he never admitted he needed until it was too late. And this is where real-life lessons punch hardest. There's a strange thing that happens to people who chase revenge. In the process of trying to inflict pain, they often forget the point and lose sight of who they used to be. Real people live like this, too. There's the parent who spends their whole life proving they were right, only to lose the child in the process. The partner who punishes their spouse for years, only to wake up alone. Nathaniel Cross became a metaphor for those who let their pain justify everything until they lose the one thing that could have actually healed them. Emma wasn't thinking about any of that when she left. Her heart wasn't filled with triumph or vindication. It was simply exhausted. She looked out the window of the car as the mansion faded in the distance and whispered to herself, "Never
again. What she didn't expect, what she didn't prepare for, was the future growing inside her. It started with nausea, fatigue, the kind of fatigue that doesn't come from emotional burnout, but something deeper. She bought a test, alone, in a small pharmacy in a sleepy little town. And there, in the dim light of a guest house bathroom, Emma found out she was pregnant. The air left her lungs, not in fear, but in something closer to disbelief. Of all the cruel twists in her story, this one felt the most unreal. She had walked away from the man who broke her, but now, a part of him was inside her. At first, she considered hiding it forever, never telling him, protecting her child from the weight of that legacy. But the truth has a way of surfacing. Months passed, her body changed, her face softened. Strangers began smiling at her in grocery stores, offering seats at cafes. There's a glow that pregnant women carry, an unspoken signal to the world that life is beginning again. She moved into a cottage at the edge of town. Her mother visited often, always bringing something warm, a blanket, soup, hope. And for a while, Emma felt safe. But Nathaniel Cross was not the kind of man who let go easily. He hired investigators, quietly, discreetly. He combed through every trace of her departure until one afternoon, a photo landed on his desk. Emma, on a bench beneath a tree, hand on her belly, face half hidden in a sun hat. He didn't breathe for a full minute. Pregnant. His. He drove himself. No entourage, no security. Just a man with a storm inside him, and a secret he had no idea how to confront. When he saw her in person, sitting quietly with a book in her lap, the world narrowed. Her stomach had curved into a clear sign of life, and she radiated peace in a way he had never seen before. He didn't know what he would say. He didn't know how to ask for something he had never given. Forgiveness. When she saw him, her entire posture shifted. The book dropped. Her hand instinctively cradled her belly. Her eyes sharpened like a blade. "What are you doing here?" she asked. He couldn't speak at first, could only stare. "You're pregnant," he finally said. "That's none of your business," she snapped. "But it's mine, isn't it?" His voice trembled slightly. She didn't answer with words, but her eyes did. For a brief second, he saw it. The flicker of truth. And then the wall went back up. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you didn't deserve to know." Those words, so simple, so cutting, hit Nathaniel harder than any betrayal ever had. This was the cost, not just of revenge, but of being too proud to admit you were wrong. When she tried to walk past him, he grabbed her wrist. "Don't touch me," she said, yanking herself free. "Don't come near us again." And just like that, she was gone again. He stood alone in the wind, the tree branches rustling above him like the whisper of fate. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't about punishment anymore. This wasn't about losing her. He had already lost her. This was about losing the chance to ever be a part of the child's life. The child that was his only shot